Hey, I want to show you how I mixed this orchestra at home piece, or this virtual orchestra piece. Um, it's not really a how-to or anything. Each of these steps is a whole topic, but it's more of an overview of the workflow and the steps. Now, first of all, there is kind of a step 0, and that is to send good instructions. As the editor, you want to receive the highest quality files that you can get. And it also helps if everyone's on the same page about the workflow and the editing preferences, stuff like that. So I sent this document to everyone. The first thing is the sync track. That is a tempo-mapped click track and backing track that they could play along to. So the link's included there, easy access. And here's the really, really important instructions. See, it's just a tiny little paragraph. I'll go over this in a second. How they clapped along. They did their sync clap at the beginning. And then further down, I give more tips for people who need them. Some of these people were new to recording, so I wanted to give them the basic rundown of how to get good audio. And I also edited the video, so I told them what kind of video I want. In hindsight, this was probably too much. To be honest, the more you write, the more likely people are to ignore some of the points. So you have to find the most important points and just lay those ones out. And then on page 3, even extra stuff. So really important stuff at the top and then less important as we go down. So that's like step 0, give good instructions so you receive good files. And then there's a kind of a step 0.5, which is to keep yourself organized. Here's the folder for my Reaper project, which is just the audio edit portion of this project. It's got all my Reaper files, some extra stuff like the score. And here's what I like to do. Here's my original files folder. This is just the untouched files that people gave to me. In case for some reason I need to roll back to the original file. Untouched, except I did edit the file names just to keep myself organized again. These are all videos, and I've got a folder for people who only gave me audio. Since I'm doing the video edit later, I want to keep this separate because I don't need that in my video editing. So I'll keep it separate. Okay, so I'm just organized. Even before I jump into Reaper, I'm organized on my computer itself. So step 1 of editing is just import everything. Get everything into your session with the settings that you like. I dropped everything in, put it in score order. We got woodwinds, then brass, and then strings at the bottom. Set up my reference track, which is an original recording of this piece. And get it all aligned. For this project, it was super easy. Everyone gave me a very nice sync clap. So I just lined those up with the clap. And some people are off by a little bit, so you got to adjust for that. But this sync clap must have saved me half an hour, maybe an hour. So anyway, that's all just dropping everything in. No mixing or anything yet. Level 2 is some basic levels, some basic volume adjustment. And let me show you why we need that. Listen to this without the volume adjustment. I turned it down by 12 just to not blow out your speakers, but check out the master limiter. I think this is actually normal. When people hand you files, they're going to be kind of loud, and you add all those files up and everything's just blown out. So step 1 is basically turn everything down. So check it out. This flute is turned down by 16. This viola is turned down by 21. Just get everything to a reasonable volume. There's some automatic ways to do this. I believe on this project I used one of Reaper's like automatic normalization actions. And by the way, this is all at the clip level or at the item level. You'll notice that the tracks are all at 0. They're not touched yet. I would consider that part of mixing. Right now I'm just importing and cleaning things up, so it's all at the clip level. If you know mixing, you'll know about this is part of gain staging. Let's listen to that now. You might not hear a difference, but nothing's clipping. Versus this. And that just makes a big difference in your overall mix and your workflow for later. That's levels. Next up is cleanup. I just go in and both automatically and manually cut out silences. See here, there's a big spot where the violins were playing nothing. So cut out silences, and again, manually or automatically add fades. Of course, you've got your intro fade for everyone, and then a fade anytime you're making a split, and everyone's outro fade. At this stage, I also do some really basic EQing. For example, that trumpet doesn't need much below 300. These cellos don't need much below 100. Stuff like that, which I'm not really considering mixing yet. It really is more of a cleanup thing. If I were to do noise reduction, I would do it right now. I don't think I did on this particular project. The noise floor was not bothering me. But you can consider this splitting to be like a manual noise reduction. So that's the cleanup phase. The next step is the basic mix. And let's just hear a before and after. Here's no mixing, just some cleanup. And here's my basic mix. Now this could go right here, or it could go much later. Usually I like to finish editing before mixing, but in this case, there are some tricks I wanted to try mixing, and honestly it kind of helps. It can inspire you a little more when you're listening back to at least a basic mix instead of completely dry tracks. So here's my basic mix. I set up a mix bus. That's just a routing thing I tried this time. My reverbs I set up, which I'll go into in a minute. All my instruments are in groups now. We got the flute group, which contains the oboe. We got clarinets, all these instrument groups. The instruments are also color-coded now at the mixing step, just to make everything look nicer and help me work faster. We've also got some basic volume, like these flutes are now at -3. The horns are at just -2. We might have some individual instrument volumes set up too. And some really basic panning, just orchestral panning. Flutes left, clarinet left, cellos on the right. Okay, just a really basic mix to get me started and to get me hearing something a little nicer as I work. So about these reverb channels, actually before I started mixing this, I went hunting for articles or videos about how to handle this exact situation. How do you set up reverbs for this kind of orchestra at home project? And I found a couple great ones. I'll leave links in the video description so you can just go read them yourself. But we got this site, and then we got this article. To put it really simply, when you listen to an orchestra in a hall, some instruments are closer to you and some are farther away. The ones that are closer to you, you're going to hear more of their dry sound, more of their direct sound, and you're going to hear less of their room reverb. The instruments that are farther away, you're going to hear less of their direct sound and more of their reverb. So by having these front, middle, back channels, you can send different instrument groups to those to get that effect. There's some more complex stuff like the early reflections, and there's like an EQ roll-off when you get farther away, but you can read about those in the articles. Now on to real editing. I think this is the most important part of these projects, is the edit. The first part of that is pitch editing. Let's hear a before and after. Here's before pitch editing. Here's after the pitch editing. Much nicer. This is a whole topic that I could go into, but just really quick, I use mostly Melodyne and a little bit of Reaper's built-in functions, which one of those is the take pitch envelope. So if you need a quick adjustment and you don't want to go into Melodyne, just use that. Also the item pitch. And it's a combination of some automatic pitch editing and a lot of manual pitch editing. And just in general, I guess my goal is to make everything sound nice, but to also sound natural. And next up is rhythm editing. Let's hear a before and after of rhythm. Pay attention to measure 28 right here. Before. And with some rhythm editing. There's a few ways to do this in Reaper. One is, I think I use this method the most. Stretch markers. You can just adjust the length of some rhythms. Another way is the old split and slide. And then there's a special case for entrances. Sometimes you can just kind of create your own attack by splitting and making a gap and just deciding that's where your note enters right there or cuts off. I would kind of include the attacks and cutoffs of notes in the rhythm editing section. So that's rhythm editing. And with that, we're done with editing, and we're going to move on to mixing. Now, I forgot to save a separate version of my stuff because I see my corrective EQ here, and I see a little bit of extra EQ moves like mixing EQ. But when I jump into my next session, all my EQ's gone. It's because it's frozen. Freezing is a step you can do in Reaper. When you know you're done with a phase, you can freeze your tracks, which is like pre-rendering them, and it frees up some of your computer's processing power. You can also just unfreeze. So when I unfreeze, yeah, my effects show up. And there's some extra EQing done to many of the individual instruments and probably some of the groups, I think. Just those kind of basic EQing mixing moves. And then the section that I actually debated a lot with myself over compression, I got a bunch of files that didn't have much dynamic range, and this piece needs a lot of dynamic range. So I was wondering, do I compress or not? In this case, I did compress. Let's hear a before and after. Here's no compression. Here's compression. It does sound a little nicer. So overall, I'm glad I added compression. Let's take a look at the compressed violins. They still have their dynamics. The dynamics are just tamed a little bit. Overall, I think it was a good move. Compression. And the next step, automation. Like I said, this piece needs a lot of dynamics. But what I received didn't have much dynamics. It's a combination of, when you're just in your room, you probably play with less dynamics than you would in a hall. It's also the devices that people were using capture less of that dynamic range. So anyway, I wanted to add dynamics back in. You'll see my session looks a lot different now, a lot cleaner. I got some cool actions to collapse folders, to show and hide automation. Now here's a couple of examples of the automation in action. This is the woodwinds channel, and we took it down because listen to this part. You'll hear that the cellos and violas are very important. And what are the woodwinds doing there? It's just kind of holding out whole notes, kind of just supporting. And I just found that before I automated that down, it was too loud. It was kind of getting in the way of that cello viola melody. So you can bring things down. You can also push things up. Take a look at my mix group. Here's that crescendo that we've been listening to earlier. It's kind of the big climax of the piece, and I just helped it out just a tiny bit, going from 0 to 1 on the master. So the whole orchestra is doing a little bit more of a crescendo there. The brass bus has nothing, but there's quite a bit like on the French horns group. For example, right here, I think I just wanted the audience to know, like, hey, the French horns are entering here, so I bumped them up a little bit. So, you know, your automation moves like that, bringing things out, pushing things back. Okay, and then a couple other finishing touches on the mix. It was getting a little muddy. So I've got a dynamic EQ. Dynamic EQ, just taming those low mids a tiny bit. There was a part right here where someone was resonating really bad. I think it was like some of the woodwinds working together. Thanks to my friend Andreas for pointing that out to me. Anyway, some more finishing mixing touches. And at the very end, the mastering touches, I guess you'd call them. Most importantly, getting the overall volume correct. Remember, we did so much turning down of all the instruments just to get our mix more manageable. Well, now we're going to add that back in. I've got like the tiniest bit of compression. And then this master limiter just to add 5 dB more gain. This ozone with a little bit of EQ and a tiny bit of stereo width. And the loudness meter to make sure I'm hitting whatever I want. I think I was going for like -14 or 16. And after that step, I'm done with the mix. Those are all the steps I took to mix this project. I guess the final step is let it sit for a day, listen to it the next day, and make sure you really are done. You might catch something later. But anyway, that's my basic overall workflow. Hope it helps. Maybe I'll dive into some of these topics later. Bye.